Hi, everybody. Welcome. We see people pouring into this session, incredibly important session about large language models and educational settings. We're going to start with a little bit of a roundtable of introductions of all of our esteemed panelists today. We'll give people just another 30 seconds to come on in. You see a lot of smiling faces, even though people are in all sorts of different time zones. All right, Sohan, can I ask you to give a quick introduction of what Flint does for LLMs and education?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, everyone, thanks, Alex, for having us. My name's Sohan, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Flint. Our website's flintk12.com if you want to check it out. But what we're doing is we're helping schools embrace AI. So what we built is an AI platform that gives administrators the ability to give students safe access to LLMs while having the right monitoring and student data protections in place that they need to have. And more importantly, we give teachers a really easy way to start using AI to actually enhance learning. We think that right now in education, when we talk to educators, a lot of the conversation is that they think AI is synonymous with ChatGPT. It makes sense. That's like the AI tool out there. That's what every student and every teacher is using. But we're really trying to change that by building AI specifically for schools.
Fantastic. Let me pass it to you, Sharad. Tell us about Merlyn Mind.
Sure. I'm one of the co-founders, and I'm looking at data and information. Merlyn Mind has been working on building a Gen AI platform and powering our own assistant, Merlyn, within a few thousand classrooms, focused on empowering the teacher to influence the learning outcomes. We've been building a lot of the services for a few years right now, and we're doing it as responsibly as possible.
Yes, and Merlyn Mind has put out some amazing open source tools to help tools of all kinds work well in an education setting and try to reduce hallucinations and some of the major problems. We'll talk about that more in this session. Jason, can I actually, Bethanie, let me pass it to you. Bethanie, tell us about Atypical AI.
Absolutely. We like to say we provide end-to-end infrastructure for AI in education. And I guess I really believe that we have to bring AI to all the stakeholders in the market and adapt it for them. So we're specifically focused on bringing safe and good assessments to teachers, to content providers everywhere, to tutors, etc. So hopefully the best of AI comes and is combined with real learning science into a tool that works for like individuals.
Absolutely. And the assessment space is such an important part of this whole world and one that AI can really disrupt. Jason, last but not least, you are coming from a slightly different angle with new markets. Tell us about what your relationship to education and AI.
Sure. So, New Markets is one of the longest running education technology investors. We invest in Series A and B companies, usually with 2 to 20 million in revenue. Some of the companies you might know are Learn Platform. We were a lead investor in Learn Platform, Presence Learning, Questar back in the day, if you remember assessments from the early day. And to date, we've done about 40 investments. We're big believers that AI right now is in a rapidly growing seed stage of development. So I just published an article about a month ago about 700 seed stage investors who are investing in Edtech, and all of them are calling me saying, what AI tools should I look at? What companies do you think are going to be the most successful? And we'll get more into the details of that in a bit.
Amazing. 700 seed stage investors. That's
yeah,
incredible.
I thought when I started out, there would be like 50 and this would be easy to put together, but it ended up growing and growing. There's a very large seed investor network out there.
Which makes sense given that nobody knows what winners are going to happen. What's going to happen in this space? Will it be the big incumbents? Will it be new companies? So just as a matter of quick introduction, we're about a year, almost exactly a year from generative AI hitting the big stage, becoming the fastest growing technology of all times. The power of large language models, which is the architecture that fuels generative AI, has really been on display now for a year. And we've seen it get better and better, create text, video, images, audio. But we've also realized that school settings have privacy issues, they have security issues, they have appropriateness issues. You can't necessarily just put a chatbot in front of a child of almost any age and then say, just do what you'd like. And all of these folks, as you've heard, are thinking about what does it mean to actually use LLMs in educational settings. So I want to start with you, Sharad, because Merlyn Mind has thought very deeply about all of the problems that come up when LLMs hit a classroom, and you've been working on overcoming it. Tell us about what some of those issues are when you put an LLM in an educational environment, and what Merlyn Mind is doing to address them.
Sure. Yeah. I want to start off. Thanks, Alex, for the question. I want to start off by saying I think there's the good side is there's been a fundamental shift in kind of human-computer interaction, and technically it has to do with scale and complexity. We used to work with millions of parameters. We have billions of parameters, and that's enabled better language understanding and more general knowledge. There's been obviously a lot of advances in algorithmically, from transformer architectures to attention to RAGs, all this cool stuff, and this very interesting, almost emergent phenomenon of making these small changes to quantitative parameters leading to these qualitative behaviors. Context, we used to work with simpler patterns. We're able to grasp context. Astounding synthesis, we're able to integrate knowledge from different sources. But all that, to your point, it comes with some challenges. When you say we're going to scale, yeah, you're going to get some noise. You're going to get some, as the field has seen, some hallucinations. What we're doing is we'll work with a walled garden. We'll work with a closed ecosystem and pull from responsibly from certain curated sources. So if we work with a school district with their content, that's one way to minimize hallucinations. And we've been also training for hallucinations. We put out, as you rightly said, Alex, earlier, we've put out some models on Hugging Face for safety models, which has actually piqued a lot of interest. And we have inbound where folks have tried these models and said, this is less biased, it's safer, it's smaller. So that's good feedback, because this is not a once and done thing. Appropriateness models, it's what does appropriate mean? We have some questions saying, hey, is it okay to bully? That's an interesting question. Do you just say, nope, that's wrong? Or do you say, let's think about this? And how do you make it grade appropriate? So we have a lot of parameters we're looking at. We're trying to come up with explanations and source attribution, where there's a continuous effort for red teaming over here, both internal, and we will have a consortium where we will invite, and there will be a call to action soon, to invite districts and other diverse stakeholders to come in and break this. We're here to solve the problem with the community. I think one thing I would like to call out is it's not us versus them. It's listen, we have a problem. We have a fantastic opportunity and solution, but let's solve this together. We're going to have to co-create it. Let's solve this together. Those are some of the technical things we're doing internally, but also it's an ecosystem play. We need that collaborative community development.
Yeah. And so for those who hear words like RAG and parameters and say, oh, I'm not sure I know what these are, remember to check out the AI glossary in the resources section, because there's a lot of terminology here. But yes, you've mentioned things like hallucination, bullying, age appropriateness, bias, huge issues. And I want to pass this to you, because I know that you're thinking about some of these same issues. Tell us a little bit about how Flint thinks the walled garden approach, keeping the data internal, not connecting it to the internet, and having some other ways to train and give inferences is one way. Tell us a little bit about Flint's approach to keeping LLMs safe.
Yeah, it's a great question, Alex. So we're not working as much on the research side of LLMs, but we are working on the application side, right? So how do we make LLMs actually safe for schools to adopt and go out and tell teachers and parents that this is the tool we're using and this is how students get to use AI? And a lot of our approach there has just been driven by conversations with school administrators. So at the moment, we take a lot of care to make sure that student privacy is really protected. They're not sharing any sort of personally identifiable information with any third-party vendors, especially with like OpenAI, that sort of thing. So we're making sure that student data privacy is protected. And in terms of the monitoring piece of this walled garden, that's really been more of a two-way conversation with school administrators, right? So we initially started building this platform. We expected that school admins would want a lot of insight and specific monitoring and filtering of how students are using LLMs. And I think that if we were having this conversation a year and a half ago, that would have been the case. But what we were surprised to find out is that because students are already using ChatGPT and administrators and teachers are fully aware of that, their administrators are aware that if they come out with this very enclosed, very big brothery platform where they can see everything that's going on, students are just not going to use it. They're going to hotspot into ChatGPT or every other AI tool out there. So I think the conversation with administrators has been pretty great in the sense that they're willing to adopt tools pretty quickly, and they recognize that full monitoring is not going to be a viable solution, right? You need to build something in conjunction with student interests to make sure that students actually get value out of the tool. The last thing you want to do is buy another edtech tool and then nobody uses it, even students, right? So I think the conversation with them is like, okay, how do we just have table stakes, student privacy protected, and some basic monitoring, right, in case there's issues of academic integrity or other sensitive topics being discussed. Right. But at the same time, like, adoption is key, right? Because if we think about why we're even all in this, virtual room together, it's because of adoption of AI, right? It's because of what ChatGPT has done to education. So I think, like, for most administrators we work with, they're very aware of that reality. That's the reason why they're even spending time talking to me in the first place. So I think adoption for us goes hand in hand, like that safety goes hand in hand with what will actually get usage, what will students actually want to use as a product experience in terms of like safe walled garden environments. Yeah, great question though.
Yeah. And so you're mentioning the security and data side, and you can feel this sort of litany of potential issues. And I know that many of our attendees have faced these head on as administrators in K-12, as people working in higher ed, as edtech companies say, we want to do really cutting edge Gen AI, but there's so many things we can trip over that could really cause chaos. Bethanie, you focus on assessments, and one of the things that you focus on that I think is really interesting is this idea of personalized learning in this context. And I'm just going to read a quote from you and ask you to respond to it. It says, "We aim to create a future where personalized learning becomes the norm, where educators are supported with powerful AI-driven tools, and where every learner can unlock their full potential." So tell us about the personalization vision and how you think LLMs are going to be able to get into classrooms and actually realize that vision despite all the speed bumps we've been hitting so far.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just say that I think that personalization is just one side of the coin. That, and in fact, there's been a bunch of failure cases, if you will, with pure personalization. But if you want to do personalized learning, which we believe is like really powerful, you also have to have what we call orchestration. So that means that if you're going to change content or pacing or any of these other dynamics for a learner or for a teacher, you have to be able to orchestrate it back into their community of practice. So students need to receive personalized learning and then have that orchestrated back into a classroom environment where they're able to still engage with their peers and where the teacher understands how to orchestrate all of these different paces into little learning pods where people can talk to each other and you do learning by teaching, etc. That said, I think that like personalized learning in the past was reasonably just like limited in terms of the dynamics that we were like accounting for. And the thing that's really exciting for me is that algorithmically speaking, we don't need to like build for the average anymore. We really can like start from a diversity first mindset, if you will, and from a pure like compute perspective. And we should be modeling for differences from the outset. We're no longer in this like compute or like time poverty that we were. As long as you've got both sides of the coin, I think it's like a really powerful combination. And hopefully we move more into a system where people are working towards their personal best and not towards a more externalized metric that doesn't take into account like the reality of their lived experience and their location.
I love this idea of orchestration, and I think it dovetails really nicely with what Sharad and Sohan you're both saying about working with the education community. It's not just about creating a tool and dropping it into a classroom from on high and saying, please use this, figure out all the issues. It's really about working very closely on these use cases. And Jason, I want to pass this to you about this question about orchestration, because you talk to hundreds, if not thousands of edtech companies, obviously many investors at different stages. And I guess the question I have for you is, what role does this orchestration, this idea of going the last mile, really helping schools and colleges figure out how to use this all the way to the end, all the way to the issues that might come up with an individual student in an individual classroom? How much is that the role of an edtech company versus schools and policies within an educational organization? How can the two groups work together? And when you're looking at companies or funders, how do you evaluate an edtech company's sort of orchestration strategy? Do they need to have an amazing one, or is it good enough to have great tech and then you think the policies in schools will catch up to meet them?
That is a great question and a very complicated one.
Yeah.
I would say that right now we are in the AI hackathon phase of this new in quotes. LLMs are not brand new, but they really are just on the scene for most people in the last year. And it's really important whenever I talk to school leaders to say, think of this as a hackathon, as a chance for your students to play with the newest technology. Students are quick at learning new languages and they will love it. And it's like a game. Let them play, basically. Now, that is different than what should companies do. So there are about 11,000 EdTech companies that we track in the space in K-12. It's a very large number. And the ones that succeed and get above 2 million in revenue is a pretty small number. It's about 1,000. So you have about a 10% chance of getting above 1 million in revenue. In order to do that, you need to partner super closely with the schools and districts that you work with. So Sharad was talking about they're in 1,000 schools. I don't actually know, other than, of course, Khan Academy, like too many organizations that are in thousands of districts. Right now, we're talking about thousands of schools for most companies. You want to partner deeply with them and understand what is their real objective. Are they trying to make this the best after-school program known to humankind? Are they trying to weave this into their computer science courses? Are they even going deeper and weaving it into all their CTE curriculum? Which courses, which teachers, which use cases? Like, I listen super carefully to what use cases are actually being implemented, and don't overpromise. This is in the beta phase. We're experimenting and we want students to play and we're going to learn together. And there are a lot of teachers out there, about 20% of teachers, we think, that are in kind of experimentation phase right now too, and want to try in various disciplines. Now, if you want to be successful as an entrepreneur, there are certain disciplines that are better than others. Math is exceptional. Computer science and CTE, also exceptional. If you find a history teacher who really wants to work with you, that can be fun, but you're not going to have a massive market as quickly. So really picking the right disciplines and the right teachers that want to work with you in this beta phase is super important. I feel like I only answered half your question, Alex, but it was a
No, I think there's a lot there. So I'm hearing, yes, there's an experimentation phase, but as we evolve, we're going to have to get much more deeply connected to really understand the end-to-end solution.
Actually, that helps remind me the other half of the answer is that AI is not a product in education. And by that, the product or solutions are going to be things like personalized tutoring. There are probably 40 tutoring companies that we're tracking right now.
Right.
And the ones that implement AI enablement so that students can get a response in 5 seconds instead of 2 minutes, that latency to find a real live tutor is a big deal. So if you can have someone be like tier 1 AI until the human arrives, huge value. But think really carefully about those use cases. Where can AI plug in to make the use cases better in a way that schools will find comforting? I saw in the chat, someone said hallucination, bias, these are minor issues and schools need to know that they're minor, but even at like 1% of the time, that's major in schools. So every time that comes up, that causes school leaders to kind of clamp down and say, we don't want to make this available to students until it's safe. But that's why you have to explain to them, this is in the beta phase. Students should opt into it. They're helping us learn together. I could go on.
No, it's fantastic. So I want to do a sort of a quick round around where I ask about each of your experiences. You all have incredible experience, and what you've done in the past sort of affects your vision of where AI could go. And I'm going to start with you, Sohan, because you are the youngest entrepreneur on the panel, recent graduate, computer science. You're really an AI native. I've been in it from the beginning. What is your perspective on why schools have to be innovative and embrace LLMs as quickly as possible, given your background as jumping into this space?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thanks for making me feel nice and young, Alex. I actually didn't even graduate college. I actually dropped out of Georgia Tech after my 3rd year to start up my previous startup, which is ironically a virtual events company. Yeah, so it's kind of that we're meeting here today. But yeah, I think that, again, like we're really looking at what the market is saying right now. And the fact of the matter is that ChatGPT is out there and exists, and that is pushing schools to like look for ways to not only allow safe access to students to AI, but to start asking the question of like, how can AI actually enhance learning? And what we feel is like really important for us as tech companies, like as a whole, to really flip the narrative that is currently going on about AI when it comes to educators talking about the tool. So there's a lot of like doomerism, a lot of fear about what AI could mean. There's a lot of concerns around academic integrity. Approach we're taking is, again, a lot of folks on this panel have mentioned this as well, is like we want to work very closely with educators to really iterate until we find that like perfect product experience that does deliver some of the values that like Jason was mentioning in terms of like personalized tutoring or just like helping students just get personalized learning in general. So as a company, the approach we're taking is basically just like following the needs of the market. We're just like building the tools that the market is clearly asking for. And what that means for us is we partner early on with like right now independent schools because they generally are a little bit quicker to adopt new tools. And then we just iterate in very close conjunction with them. We're not coming to the space. One of the benefits of being a younger founder is we're not coming to the space with like that opinions of what product should look like. But we don't know. Honestly, we don't know. Like when our customers ask us, like, hey, what's your 6-month product roadmap? Or like, where do you see this platform be going in the next year? We're like, yeah, we don't know. Like it's actually up to you guys. Like we're gonna work with you and your teachers, and we're gonna figure it out together because we don't think that anyone really has the answer for what AI in education looks like. The answer is kind of distributed amongst a lot of other people, and it's going to actually be formed by the companies that iterate the quickest by working most directly with teachers and students. So I mean, very upfront with any of our customers about like the fact that my co-founder and I are pretty young. We actually just frame it more as an advantage of like, hey, like we're not coming to this with like preset opinions about education. We're actually here to listen.
And I wasn't saying it as a denigration. Young entrepreneurs have a lot of advantages. Bethanie, you have been a technical leader at Google AI. You've been an advisor to UNESCO. You've been thinking about education policy. Tell us about how your background in both tech and policy influenced what you're thinking about with Atypical. And I do want to move a little quickly here so we can get to some of the audience questions.
I will be pithy. Yeah, absolutely. We worked on the strategy for the OECD's PISA science exam a couple years ago. And what we saw and what you guys are all about to experience is an increased recognition that the community aspects of learning influence the success of a learner. And they're actually coming out, what we did is we came up with measures of like, how can we understand how peers and community mindset actually influence learning? And I think the realization there that at the policy level people are getting to is that we're not just bobbly head people, right? Like humans are humans, we're social, we're emotional, we're physical. And that the thing that's making people drop out of school isn't necessarily the perfect answer to like one math question, right? It's all the other stuff that's happening. And so on the one hand, there's so much interest in personalization because there's this increased understanding that it's like addressing the whole learner that needs to like happen in order to push the needle. On the other hand, obviously there's privacy and safety issues. But we're seeing a huge amount of draw from the market for like social and emotional engagement from learners. Like learners are using Replica, Shout Ice, Character AI, Pi, and they're using it not just as like entertainment, they're using them as language learning like applications, as like tutors, as light therapy. When you see that sort of like billions of people engaging with like large language model backed agents, then you see these like really narrow applications of AI that schools are offering. You got to like ask yourself, what does that tell you about what learners need versus what we feel that we can like provide safely? So I don't have a solution. I'm just saying there's a tension there.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And I think that that's both an opportunity and a risk of AI that I don't think we talk about enough, which is that emotional connection. The fact that Replica and Character, by the way, if people don't know, are character-based personalities that are AI enabled. And I think, this younger generation, that's going to be a big part of their life. And so it's really interesting to think about how that could be supportive and not create more bullying, more social problems. Sharad, in Mind comes from a really storied background. Our founder was the head of IBM Watson's AI education initiative. You've all been thinking about education and AI for a long time. Tell us a little bit about how your background there and how Satya's background there have led to your philosophy at Merlyn Mind.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and a lot of it has been this core belief that technology can have that transformative power and that it can be a force multiplier. And we've been tracking that, the advances from the beginning, while being intentional about a lot of the sensitive issues like privacy, because you're working in a regulated environment and security. So at IBM, we were looking at tutoring systems. We were building that all the way from early childhood through K-12. We were looking at interactive technologies to do the same because we believe that they can have that transformative power. obviously with the ecosystem. We're not ignoring that, but so that's carried over into Merlyn as well. And you need to keep a pulse. When we came in, we needed to see how good was voice or multimodality before we could enter the space. It's not, chatbot is not a new thing. Eliza was there in the 60s or 50s. We've been wanting chatbot for like 6 decades. So the idea or the paradigm of a chat was a new, but that barrier has been significantly lowered for us. What changed from before to now is, I think I mentioned complexity or scale. We're working with millions of parameters. We're working with billions right now. That just really changed the landscape over here. For us, I think Sohan was also getting to it. It's inevitable that people are going to use this technology. Early this Jan, within just a month or two of releasing of ChatGPT, we were in a school. I was in a school here in Jersey, and a math teacher comes up and says, "Have you heard of this thing called ChatGPT?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" She's like, "Using the lesson plan from that today in this class." And so they're not waiting for permission. They're not waiting. It's out there. So it's almost our responsibility to do it right.
Yeah.
There's another question that just popped up.
No, I'm sorry. I want to make sure to get to some audience questions, but please.
Yeah. So just to complete that thought, I think Satya has been big in pushing that thinking of doing technology right, making purpose-built AI, which has been our mission for the last decade at IBM as well as with Merlyn, and doing it with the community, kind of creating it with them.
Yeah. It feels like that has been a really interesting theme of this whole talk is co-creation. So we have a really good question from an investor, a leading investor in the space. And Jason, I'm going to throw this to you, but others can weigh in right after. How do you feel the innovation in this space will be split between big tech, that's OpenAI, Meta, edtech incumbents, and disruptive newcomers? Jason, I'd love to hear your answer on this, and then we can go quickly around the panel, and that'll be our close. Oh, you're on mute.
That'll have to be a secret, what I just said. Definitely LLM, big tech will win in terms of LLMs at the core level. That is where there's going to be support. There's going to be capabilities that are far beyond what smaller companies can build. Now, building on the application layer above that, in K-12 especially, like I was saying before, it's not just building the application, it's the application, the use case, the implementation, the working with teachers and students and districts that is the most important now. So if you're a tech company first and schools want to work with you on something, lean into that. Do not listen to your investors that want you to be 95% ARR and just a tech company. You want 50% of your revenue coming from working with school districts in kind of consulting like collaborative way, and 50% coming from the licensing until you reach about 5 million in revenue.
Terrific. Very clear answer. Anybody else want to weigh in? I know we all have opinions on this. Bethanie, what do you think? You've been in big tech and Google.
Sure. I think nobody's going to argue with me when we say that big tech is hobbled by the requirement for perfection. And if you're asking for just innovation, I think that's going to happen in the smaller companies and spaces. Then you're going to see an integration into larger companies via partnerships and acquisitions. I also think that like the foundation models, a lot of them we're going to have to like verticalize or go a layer deeper as like novelty wears off, and they're just not getting the traffic that they used to.
Interesting. Sharad, it looks like you want to
jump in. I just wanted to add to what Bethanie said. I think there is an opportunity here, not just for the open source community, but for some of these models that they're putting out there, the weights. But there is a lot of scope for newer companies, startups to come and actually be that veneer of intelligence to fine tune for a domain, because these large models are too generic, too general. We are seeing it. I've played with these models, open source, proprietary, and we're seeing that there's a lot of domain specificity that's needed. Task specific. You could shrink your model. So getting the right size for the right task is very important. And that's a big opportunity for, I think someone had a question around disruption and startups or newer companies. Yes, by all means. And we're focused on that ourselves. So I've been in both big tech and small tech, so I can kind of do both.
Exactly.
And big tech tends to move slowly to,
there will be interesting opportunities for tech for student questions to be triaged to big tech models if they need to be, to small tech personalized wall garden models if they need to be. I think there's going to be a lot of innovation. Sohan, last sentence on this space, and then we're going to jump to the lounge.
Yeah, I think big tech will definitely win. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think definitely agree with Bethany there in terms of standards that big tech has to meet before releasing anything. I think what what really comes to mind with me is like I think the companies that will win are the ones that are most customer obsessed. I think that's what happens whenever there's any kind of new shift. And right now, like honestly, I don't see a lot of folks from big tech like putting a tons of time and energy into working directly with educators. And it makes sense because if you're Google, you're competing on so many fronts, right? You're trying to build the best new LLM and you're thinking about Gemini versus GPT-4 or GPT-5, right? Education is simply not your number one priority. And I think all it takes is for folks to just be really focused and prioritize working with educators to be able to win in this space. They kind of saw with like Tesla just going after electric cars and just like really focusing on one slice of the market and some early adopter users. I think honestly, whoever will win, it's up for grabs. I think it's just going to be the folks that really focus most on customers, regardless of whether they're a large startup versus a tiny company versus even big tech, right? If Google comes out tomorrow and says our number one priority is education, yeah, I'll buy some Google stock. I'll chips on them. So I think it just comes
an
out.
Interesting headline to wake up to. That's a phenomenal thought to end on, and I agree. Tech does not work with schools nearly enough. Even Google Classroom, which is in basically every school in the country, US at least. This has been a fantastic panel. Lots of big ideas here. We're all going to go to the lounge now. Each of our panelists, each of our speakers here has a table in the lounge, which they are welcome to join. You can go speak to them directly. All the questions that are in this chat, we will we'll follow up with. We'll see if people have time. We will try to get answers to you afterwards. We didn't mean to ignore you here. Thank you so much for being here with us. LLMs in education. It's kind of a big question, isn't it? How do we get things in? Thank you so much to our panelists, and thank you all for being here with us. We will see you in the lounge. Come join our tables, and we'll see you in the next session as well.
Thanks, Alex.